today? Hello, wonderful students. How are you all doing today? I hope you are doing great. We thank God for giving us another life. I'll continue to urge you to pray for management for the good work they are helping us to be able to reach you through this medium. That is our virtual learning. Now we continue with our topic, that is respiratory system. And I hope today we are all enjoying the good atmosphere, the oxygen that the Almighty Creator has given to us. As long as we have life, we continue to respire, to inspire before we are inspired. And that is my term that I normally use when it comes to respiratory system of humans. Now today we are continuing with human respiratory system, and we will be looking at the structure of the respiratory system. We'll also look at the functions of the structure of the various parts of the respiratory system. And we also look at how air gets into the lungs. That is the pathway for air. Now you know that for every lesson we are expecting something. We don't just learn for learning's sake. And therefore, I'll urge you to stay focused so that by the end of the lesson, that is today's lesson, you should be able to draw and label the human respiratory system. You should be able to draw and label the human respiratory system. 2, you should be able to state the characteristics of respiratory organs. That is the organs. And 3, or finally, you should be able to demonstrate how air gets to the lungs. You should be able to demonstrate how air gets to the lungs. Now we know we are not in the normal times, and we continue to put on the face mask. And even though we put on face masks, air is able to get into our system. And this is how wonderful God is. This is how wonderful God is. Because without air, organisms or living organisms cannot survive. And therefore, I'll continue to urge you to make sure that you put on the face mask when you are going out. Now, to proceed with today's lesson, let's look at the respiratory system, or the diagram of respiratory system. Now we have this structure here. And this part is the larynx. The larynx here, and we have the trachea. We also have the right bronchus. This part is the right bronchus. And we also have the left bronchus as well. We also have the heart, which is situated in between the left and the right lungs. So we have the right lungs here. This region is the lungs here, which is a very soft tissue or organ. We also have the ribs, which protect the internal organs of the respiratory system. The ribs are very hard, and therefore they protect the internal organs of the respiratory system. We also have the diaphragm here. The diaphragm is here, and we have the intercostal muscles. We also have the left lungs. We have the bronchial, which is a sub-branch of the bronchus. And we also have the alveolus. We have the pleural cavity containing fluid or liquid. And we have the pleural membrane or the skin. So this is a part of the respiratory system. And we will be looking at the functions of the various structures. But before we look at the functions of the structures, let's look at the characteristics of respiratory system or organs. Characteristics or the nature of the respiratory organs. Number 1, they are highly vascularized. That is, they are richly supplied with blood vessels. They are richly supplied with blood vessels, that is the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. The organs walls are very thin. The organ walls are very thin. They have large surface area which enhances gaseous exchange. And gaseous exchange, we are talking about the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. The surfaces are also moist to facilitate gaseous exchange or gases. The surfaces of the organs are moist in order to facilitate the movement of the gases, which is the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. So these are the characteristics or the nature of the respiratory organs. Now let's quickly look at the various functions of the parts. Now here we have a diagram here which is very clear about the respiratory system through the head up to the diaphragm. We have the nasal cavity here, we have the nose, we have the mouth here, we have the throat or the pharynx. We also have the windpipe or the trachea, as you have seen over there. And we have the lungs here, which is a soft tissue, and this is what exchanges gas or gaseous exchange. It's very soft tissue. So we have the left lungs and we have the right lungs as well. Now this pipe you see is like tubes. There are holes in it, and that is the bronchus. And we have the branches of it, which is the bronchiole. The branches or sub-branches of the bronchus. This connects to what we call the alveolus, which finally leads to the lungs, or it connects to the lungs for gaseous exchange. We also have the ribs, which protects or gives protection to the entire organs in the system. Now please let's look at the functions of the structure. First we have the nose or the nostril. Now the nostril traps or stops dust particles contained in the inhaled air with the aid of the hairs in it. It means that the hairs in the nose is very important. Why? Because it traps dust particles which is contained in the inhaled air that we all inhaled or breathe. So that is what the nostril, the function it plays or the role it plays in the system. We also have the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is for detecting smell. It also warms inhaled air and traps any microbes or microorganisms. Microorganisms are very tiny living organisms which when enters, like the coronavirus is an example of microbes. When it enters into the respiratory system through the nose or the nasal cavity, it can cause a lot of diseases which you are all experiencing. So there is a particular substance or there is a part in the nasal cavity which warms the inhaled air, so that in case there is any microbes or organisms which cannot withstand the heat or the temperature, that microbes or that organism cannot survive. So we have the nasal cavity, which is for detecting smell and also warms inhaled air and traps any microbes or microorganisms. That is the nasal cavity. Now we also have another organ or part which is the pharynx. The pharynx, it is lined with mucus. The mucus is in the nose, and the hairs which help to filter inhaled air. It means that the air that is inhaled, that is the oxygen, contains a lot of materials or particles which can affect the human respiratory organs or system. And therefore, we have the pharynx to perform that function, to trap or to stop the filth or any dirt that enters the nose. We also have the trachea. It is a passage through which inhaled air gets to the lungs and the exhaled air also gets to the atmosphere. We also have the lungs, and the lungs are the main organs for gaseous exchange, which takes place in the alveoli of the respiratory system. We also have the larynx or the voice box. This contains vocal cords which vibrate to produce sound when one is speaking. As I'm doing now, the vocal box is what is helping the sound to come out, and that is the larynx or voice box. We also have the diaphragm, which relaxes and contracts and helps in what gaseous or gas exchange during breathing. We also have the intercostal muscles here. The intercostal muscles regulate or control the variation or changes of the movement of ribs to help or aid external respiration. Now, external respiration is simply means the intake of oxygen from the atmosphere through to the lungs to release out carbon dioxide. That is external respiration. We also have the bronchi, which allows the passage of air to the alveoli, which leads or linked to the lungs. And we have the ribs. As I've already explained, the ribs protect the internal organs of the respiratory system. Now, let's look at how air gets to the lungs, or the pathway of air. First, it passes through, that is oxygen, passes through the nostril, moves to the larynx, or the larynx here. It passes through to the trachea, and it gets through to the bronchus, and from the bronchus, the air gets to the bronchioles, and from the bronchioles, then moves to the alveoli of the lungs. And the air comes out as carbon dioxide, which is the waste air from the system. So this is how air gets into the system. I hope you've been able to achieve something for today's lesson. You've been able to study the diagram of the respiratory system, and also you know some characteristics of the respiratory organs. They are highly vascularized, that is, they are richly supplied with blood vessels, and their walls are very thin as well. And we've been able to demonstrate how air gets to the lungs, and that is the pathway of air into the respiratory system or to the lungs. This is where time will permit us to end our lesson for today. We hope God will continue to protect us. Until we meet again, bye-bye for today.